sais, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as fait manquer, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as préféré, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly political chat show that picks apart all the things to love and loathe about EU policymaking. I'm Maeve McMahon, broadcasting from Strasbourg this week, where MEPs are meeting for their last voting session of 2024. Coming up on the show, 'tis the season to be merry. The festive season has arrived, a time to kick back and enjoy family and friends, and also to reflect on the year that was. From EU elections and a new European Commission to storms and floods, the year was dominated by disruption and turmoil, not to mention also being the hottest year on record. Before we welcome 2025, we ask, which were the good news stories this year? And are these challenges making Brussels stronger or weaker? And it's that time of the year again that hits our wallet hard. From Christmas shopping to family outings and parties, the festive season tends to leave us all feeling the pinch. Well, not quite all of us. New research shows that 1 in 3 members of the European Parliament gain extra income from second jobs on top of their generous salaries and perks. Now, it's perfectly legal, but what we're asking is, what message does it send? And is it undermining trust in politics? A warm welcome to our guests this weekend. Anna Stork, Austrian Liberal MEP with Renew Europe. Hannah Jalul-Muro, Spanish Socialist MEP. And Sander Smit, a Dutch Conservative with the Farmer Citizen Movement. Great to have you all with us. Thank you so much for being here. But as always, before we hear your views and your thoughts, let's just hear what exactly dominated 2024.
It started in Taiwan and it ends in Chad on December 29th. The super election year 2024. More than 1.6 billion people around the world cast ballots in 73 national elections and the European parliamentary elections. In Europe and the United States, it was not a good year for incumbents, as voters put the blame for inflation, economic woes, and problems with migration squarely on the doorsteps of ruling candidates. More than once, populists on the left and right gained substantial ground, making the formation of stable governments an art that some leading politicians are unfamiliar with. One personality stands out though, Ursula von der Leyen. France and Germany may be paralyzed, but the old and new president of the European Commission survived all political storms of the year and enters her second term with much stronger political capital. Will Europe benefit?
So, a lot to reflect on. I guess the first question, is the European Union stronger or weaker since those parliamentary elections in June? Perhaps, Chandler, we'll start with you, as your group were the big winners in those elections.
Yes, actually. Actually, I think we came out stronger because we received a clear mandate from the European voters to have a course correction towards the centre-right. That's also reflected in the composition of the new College of Commissioners, I think. And I think we'll come out stronger as Europe because we need this course correction, given the geopolitical challenges facing us.
Even though voter turnout, Hannah, wasn't so good, I mean, these elections, the European parliamentary elections, are still very much national elections about national issues.
Yeah, I think that we need to work on that, all of us together, you know, from the EU Parliament. And I always say that 70% of the laws that we take here affect our citizens, you know, in our member states nationally. So I think this is something we need to do a lot of pedagogy and not bringing all of the national issues here to the Parliament. I think it is important for people to feel and to know that this Parliament is very close to people, and we're doing a lot of issues and legislation for our citizens.
Because people expect a lot of you. There's a lot of pressure on your shoulders, and parties like your group and the Greens are not doing very well, whereas fringe groups on the right and the left are really connecting with people.
Well, I'd say you can't really say that as a whole, because we've got winners in our group and we've got some that have lost due to, as you said yourself, national circumstances. I agree that I think actually it should be the other way around, and we see that national elections are also European elections, because what we do here affects nation states, and what nation states do affect the European Union, because we've seen as well that over the last 5 years, and I'm sure we'll see even more over the next 5 years, that it's actually a lot of ministers, national governments that actually block a lot of what we try to do and what we try to advance in the European Union. So national elections should be more of European elections in the future.
And of course, there was that big EU summit this week in Brussels that we were following very closely. But just as the year does draw to a close, 2024, we wanted to ask people themselves what their expectations of MEPs were. So we paid a visit to the Brussels Christmas markets to ask them what they think the European Parliament should prioritise. Take a listen.
That they take care of the interests of the people and not of the interests of the politicians.
I would like to tax the rich people, that everything is more equal.
For next year, we hope to could live from our production, because actually it's quite difficult to live from our activity.
That they accept less money from lobbyists, and they are more conscious about citizens.
First thing, more money for retirement.
We have like really hard exams, and I think we should have longer vacations.
I like a peace for everyone. You see, we are in Brussels, a lot of cultures stay together here. We stay here for the union, so let's take together and make peace.
So there you go, more money for retirement, putting the interests of people first, and world peace. They're the asks of a selection of people in the city of Brussels. Hannah, your reaction to those asks, and what did you yourself deliver for people in 2024?
Well, I think that many issues, three issues mainly were mentioned that are very important mentions. So that means that people are worrying about these issues. That's very important. Diversity, he's at the table, they were talking, in the market that these cities are full of people, diversity and different nationalities, and peace. Definitely, I wish peace for the Middle East, which I think is a priority. Situation in Syria, it's critical in Palestine, that also in Israel with the hostages. So I think we need to work for peace, and this is something we need to work on from the Parliament and have consensus on that issues.
And this week we saw reports that the death toll in Gaza has reached 45,000 people, but that topic seems to have dropped a bit on the minds of people in this institution.
Yes, I think we've shifted, well, the general public attention has shifted obviously to Syria, the situation in Ukraine, of course, and as I'd also like to mention that the election of Donald Trump as American president also changed the view of people also on the future of the EU in geopolitics. So I think we need to deliver also. I can agree with what Hannah said, that we need to have an eye also for the situation in Israel and in Gaza. I hope that the Israeli hostages are released, that a change can be obtained, because now we saw some positive developments in this regard. We already heard the Dutch Minister of Defense speculating about the EU taking the lead in peace negotiations on Ukraine and Russia. For my part, and personally, this is up to Ukraine and not up to individual member states of the EU. But
well,
these
it's a big priority as well for Poland, and Poland will take over the so-called presidency of the EU Council as of January 2025. So we will be referring a lot to the government of Donald Tusk. Your reaction to that clip, Anna, and also what have you delivered in 2024?
Well, I think what this clip showed is a lot of the issues that we're having right now, from inflation's high prices, but also the question of peace. We're living in a time of geopolitical turmoil, and I think this year has been the year that has shown everyone that Europe finally needs to break out of its cocoon. We've made it very easy for ourselves over the last few years, or even decades. It's been quite cozy under the nice blanket of the US supporting us, under the nice blanket of using Chinese products but still having a pretty good economy ourselves. But we need to break out of that cocoon.
And have you broken out of that cocoon? Like here in Strasbourg, do you get that feeling that there's a wake-up call?
Well, I think in some ways, yes, but not enough yet. I want to say the one thing that the one positive thing, the one way in which we've broken out of that cocoon and realised that we need a stronger Europe is Schengen. And this is something to celebrate in 2024. We finally got Bulgaria and Romania into our Schengen region. And I believe that this is an exact and clear effect of that turmoil situation that we're having.
And indeed, 17 years after they got EU membership, Romania and Bulgaria, they finally joined this Schengen zone, which of course was a huge relief for the 25 million people who live in those countries. And we're waiting for Austria, of course, to let that happen. So that was a good news story. I guess another good news story, if we look back at the year, was inflation is dropping. If you look at the economic forecast of the European Commission, growth is gradually coming back. The labour market is strong. But we're not feeling it yet, Hannah, right? We're not.
Yeah, but I think we will eventually. We have to remember that this was also related to the war in Ukraine, that we hope also for peace. I hope all these peace talks will come to an end because, many lives were lost there, and we need peace here, and also for the Ukrainians who were, wearing a very illegitimate and illegal war. Well, I have to say here that Spain is the fastest growing economy in the world, and the provision for Brussels to Spain is more than 3%, and we are very proud of these results. But they are the effect of the labour and pensions reforms that we have done in our countries. And I want to say this here because sometimes it's important to work on that things. They were very important measures and very much applauded by the OCDE and Brussels. I think we have done a very good job in that sense, and I hope that will reflect also in other economies of the EU.
Would you agree with that?
Well, I think I won't delve into the Spanish national situation too much, but I think on an EU level, we're now at a pivotal point. We need to make this course correction I spoke about work, because we see real dangers facing our European industries and challenges. We see closures of German factories. We see also employees losing their jobs. So I think we ought to address this lack of competitiveness in the European Union in the coming year, because we cannot wait anymore for this.
And this is why Mario Draghi, who was tasked in drafting that gloomy report, do or die were his words. He said, do or die, do it, or literally Europe will sink on the global stage. So there's really a lot at stake here, and I don't know if this will be magically solved, because of course implementing the plans in that report are not as easy.
No, absolutely. I think it's important to actually not call or not even think about it being solved magically, because this would be a wrong sign to people. I think this is going to be hard work for all of us, hard work for the nation states, hard work for the Commission that is finally taking up their work as we speak. It's taken a long time. We're happy that they're finally in office and that they can start working, because there's a lot that we need to do. Yes, you said it. There's somewhat of a positive development, but there's a lot of things we need to do. You mentioned some things, but when we talk about energy, for example, it is finally time to really step into an energy union. And there's a lot of investments that need to happen, and we need to find ways of actually making those investments happen in order to really support governments, but also industry in actually investing. So yes, we have a lot of homework to do.
And to do that homework, of course, you need the visionary leaders. And just on that point of figureheads, you mentioned Donald Trump earlier. Well, actually, Time magazine put him on their front cover as the person of the year of 2024. For 97 years, the editors at Time have chosen a person of the year who they believe, for better or worse, have shaped the world and the headlines in the year. Would you agree with putting Donald Trump on the front page there? Is he the most influential man in the world today? And what about a European? Who's the most influential European? What European would you put up there?
I think that, in fact, he's a very influential politician, and he has to cross many obstacles to get where he reached. It's a reality. Don't forget about the Capitolio, episode. And despite of that fact, he became the president of the U.S., with a lot of difference in the votes with Kamala Harris, even that the polls were putting them very close. So this is something to take into account. Many things are going to reshape the situation now because of he's going to do this economic policy, and with Europe we don't in trade issues. So I think we need to take a lot about that. And this is why also, and I need to applaud the decision, President von der Leyen, we're signing with the Mercosur countries, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, and Argentina. The Mercosur, and I think this is a very nice. She understands saying that we are here politically and in trade issues. This is very good for the EU, because we need to have leadership with everything around. I think that was a good position.
Even though the farmers, of course, weren't so happy with the Mercosur, and they're protesting as well in Strasbourg this week as we speak. But just on the point of a European figurehead, who inspires you?
Well, inspiring is a different question than being influential, but I think there's a lot of people who inspire me. One who's just left the European stage was Margrethe Vestager, because she was one figure who, even in the last mandate, has shown that Europe has muscle, Europe has power when we act together. When we come together as one, we can be powerful against, for example, big companies and platforms like Google, like Meta, but also, and I think we're seeing this right now, we have to be strong against platforms like TikTok. And Vestager has shown over the last years we can only do this together. So I'm hoping that over the next 5 years, we will also work together as a strong Europe.
And on TikTok, in fact, the EU Commission have started a probe this week on that, so we'll keep a close eye on that. But another point, I guess, if you look back at the year, was climate. And it was the hottest year on record, according to scientists, with very high temperatures set to continue into next year. We also saw severe storms that left millions without power and deadly floods in Eastern Europe and Spain, creating havoc. We also saw this week apocalyptic scenes in the French island of Mayotte after they were struck by a deadly cyclone. For more context, we had a little chat with the climate activist Chloe Mikuláš in Brussels.
For the first time ever, average temperatures actually exceeded 1.5 degrees. And this has had very real consequences for people, you know, torrential floodings and hurricanes, claiming the lives of thousands and actually destroying communities. And at the time when we should be accelerating on climate action and adaptation, we actually see the opposite. We see conservatives aligning with the far right to delay or weaken crucial regulations such as the anti-forestation law. And we're also seeing climate denial making a comeback, including here in the European Parliament. And it's not one or the other. It's not climate versus social. It's not climate versus competitiveness or climate versus, you know, sovereignty. We need to ensure livable conditions for all on this planet. Otherwise, this is when we are actually going to face a very real crisis. So Europe has been a climate champion for a while, but will it continue to actually walk the talk, or is it just going to be empty words for the next mandate?
And that's Chloe Mikuláš there, making the point that calls to slow down the green transition are now dominating the EU's climate debate. Looking at yourself there, Sándor, could we say that 2024 was the year the Green Deal died and got buried?
I think we brought back, that this is the year of which brought back climate realism, in fact, that we have to have a climate policy which takes into account the geopolitical and the global environment, socio-economic environment. So we have to be realistic. The EU greenhouse gas emissions are now 6% of the global emissions, and we see that the competitiveness of the European economy is indeed also threatened by some aspects, some excessive elements within this Green Deal, which have to be corrected. And I, along with my colleagues, also from Germany in plenary today, really want to work towards a correction on, for example, the ban on the combustion engine. We really need to reverse.
Companies need clarity, because if your party keep trying and changing the rules of the game, companies are getting confused because they're planning ahead to the future.
Yeah, indeed, but if we don't have any companies anymore because the goals are unattainable, the targets are impossible, then we don't have any companies to provide clarity with. So we have to protect industry, provide clarity, but not have targets which are not attainable for EU industrial sectors. And we see the decline before our eyes. We have to be realistic here in a global context. We will see the US also reversing climate policy.
Reversing climate policy, meanwhile the science is clear and the scientists are freaking out, to put it mildly.
Well, if you would allow me, I do always find it a bit baffling that it's farmers' parties that say these kind of things, because there's one thing that we agree on. There should be less bureaucracy, less red tape, less administrative burden, also for farmers. But I do find it baffling because it should be, and actually often is, farmers that are at the forefront of the fight against climate change, because they're the ones that are suffering the most, even already now. If I look at my own country in Austria, where we're losing forests, losing soil that we can't work on anymore, that we're losing crops every year because of climate change. So it always baffles me why it is farmers' parties in the Conservatives that fight the Green Deal.
Yeah, I cannot agree with her more. I mean, that's, we have lived the Dana now in Spain with more than 200 dead people, you know. I mean,
Valencia,
what can I say about this? Climate change is here. We need to work towards the Green Deal very strong. We need to be united in that. I was reading a very interesting news and very sad news the other day. We are going to have the first day with no ice in the Arctic, like from now in 3 years, you know. I mean, after what is happening in places like Spain and other parts of the world, I mean, we cannot say climate change is not here. We need to address that. We have very scary forces in this parliament denying that fact. And I mean, we cannot comply with them. And we have the issue of the strategic autonomy we are talking about comes also with this issue. We need to be with, you know, circular economy, with many issues that make us independent and strong against this negationist of the climate change. We cannot be there.
A glimpse view, really, of the conversations we're having in plenary. Just a brief
Just to have an opportunity to reply to that, I would really agree with you that we need climate adaptation. I mean, climate change is a fact, but I spoke about curbing emissions or climate policy. This is a different thing. This is a political choice. So we should put our funds, our efforts into climate adaptation to help our farmers adapt, to have better water management, for instance. I come from the Netherlands myself. When we had extreme weather events and the number of extreme weather events have increased, but due to our technological and climate adaptation advance, the number of dead have declined over the decades. We constructed our delta works in the Netherlands after the deadly floodings of 1953, which caused the death of thousands of citizens in my country. So we need to invest in such projects instead of wasting our funds, EU funds, on a climate policy which will not change the global greenhouse gas emissions. We have to take into consideration in all climate policy this geopolitical context.
And it's a debate we'll come back to next year. Briefly, to conclude the conversation, if 2024 was a movie, what would you give it as a title? Hannah?
Change of cycle.
Anna?
I think I'd call it 13 going on 30, the year that Europe finally had to grow up.
Shandor?
The film title? The movie title? Yeah, I'd call it Rocky.
Wonderful. On that point, thank you so much. We can conclude this conversation. Stay with us, though, here on Euronews, because in a while we will be back to hear how MEPs can focus on lawmaking while also juggling a number of nixers on the side. See you soon here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Maeve McMahon in Strasbourg, where MEPs have been meeting for their last plenary session of 2024. And on their agenda this week, the war in Syria, misinformation on social media, and protests in Georgia. What wasn't on their agenda was this, a new report from Transparency International that claims that 3 in 4 MEPs have some sort of side activity, and 1/3 of MEPs have declared at least one paid activity. According to the data, MEPs have collectively earned over €6.3 million per year in side jobs. Now, these nixers are legal, but must be declared. So I guess my question to the 3 MEPs sitting here is that the salary is €100,000 net per year. Is that not enough, Anna, as a salary?
I don't think it should be about the salary. So I think we're the statistic. If it's 1 in 3, I'm someone who has declared a side salary, because I'm a district representative as well. I've taken on that role in 2020 and my term comes to an end in 2025. So it was clear to me that I ran for it, so I'm going to finish the job. So I'm going to continue being that until 2025. And I have to say that for me, so this isn't about the money, but what I find is it's actually very refreshing and helping me to flee the Brussels bubble every now and again, to have some sort of relation to the real life. And
look, and a lot of MEPs, you know, they come from, they're teachers, they're lawyers, they're doctors, they're presenters, they're former stars of certain things back in their countries, you know. So, of course, I think the issue here is the conflict of interests, if it's certain lobbying. Do you have an extra job?
No, and when they have asked me to, I'm coming from the university, I was a teacher at university, and when they asked me about taking money from one of my, when I get classes conferences, I say no. And I have 4 other posts, you know, aside of my work as an MP, and I don't take any money for that. So I only take my salary here.
Because it must be tempting. You must get flooded with emails and invites for lunch and dinner, interesting invitations everywhere. Shandor, what about you? Do you have another job?
No, I don't have a side job anymore. This is my full-time job because I also wanted to prevent, as a delegation leader of the Farmer Citizen Movement, this impression. But I can agree with Anna that it's important if MEPs come from society, have taken up political roles in the member states, but also in society as a whole and in the economy, maybe had their previous jobs which were very important and they had to transition out of. I think we ought to be tolerant of that, as long as transparency is provided and guaranteed.
That is the key, of course, transparency. And there's a German MEP, a former farmer, Christian Singer, who was listed in that report because seemingly she's the head of the Bavarian Farmers Association, but she's also on the Agricultural Committee here, and she's earning €5,000 per month for that job. Is that okay in your eyes?
I think it's important to have these roles not put into opposition if it's declared and if it's transparently conveyed that they hold both functions, then if there would be a real conflict of interest, they should abstain from the vote, obviously. But on general, we talked about pensions. People ask about pensions. We're all going to be pensioners, I hope at least, that we make it that far. But should we then not be able to vote on a pension? Or should somebody who's on the pensioners association board not be able to vote on pension or work on pension? This is in the general interest. So food production is in the general interest, I think, vital countryside and also pensioners' interest. So, but if there's a clear personal conflict of interest for personal benefits, of course, politicians should abstain from votes, but we should not generalize.
Well, let's bring in one of the authors of the report from Transparency International to hear what he hopes this data could change. We can take a listen now to Rafael Cargano from Transparency International.
According to the Code of Conduct, MEPs are not allowed to engage in paid lobbying activities. But the problem, as always, is that there is no explanation of what is meant by paid lobbying. So it is left to the discretion of each MEP to decide whether or not there is a conflict of interest. We must ban all activities that could have an implication or an impact on European public policies, because that's the only way we can really prevent conflicts of interest. And then sanctions must also be applied in the event of a breach of the Code of Conduct, because we have also analyzed the fact that in the previous parliament, 0 sanctions were applied for breaches of the Code of Conduct in relation to these declarations of interest.
So that was Rafael Cargano there speaking from Transparency International, highlighting the need, of course, for sanctions and transparency, like what you said, Hannah.
Well, I think that I agree with you when you said there's no, the most important thing is that there's no conflict of interest. But I think personally that people should have one post, one salary. That's all. Not in her case, for example, because I understand that she has another mandate in her country and she's going to finish it in the next year. So there's an explanation for that. But we are very clear with ethics for example, in my party. And I think we have a good salary here. And I think we cannot be tempted by other issues. We can do it, but I mean, not taking money. I think one post, one salary. This is what I think personally.
And I think what shocked Transparency International is this: they're talking about the new parliament here, because obviously we all know what happened in the previous parliament, and that destroyed the image of the European Parliament and the trust between citizens, which is what, of course, you in your daily job you're trying to fix.
Absolutely, and I think what shocks me the most in this video as well, and what he said, and I think the thing that is even more important than the question of do they earn something on the side is the question of the Code of Conduct, and the question that if there is a breach of it, there not being any sanctions. That is, if I can be frank, ridiculous, because we have to be strict on ourselves. I mean, we're so strict on everyone else, then we have to be even stricter on ourselves. And all I want to point out as well is being strict on ourselves when there's a conflict of interest, it's not just about whether I think it's a conflict of interest. And this is a technicality, but I think it's important to say here. It's actually in all of our responsibility to look at this. For example, when I'm being made rapporteur, so when I'm being made responsible for a file, then it's up to the whole committee to decide whether they think there's a conflict of interest for me or not. And we have to take that seriously. And this has actually already happened, I think at least once in this mandate. So I think we're showing that we are taking this seriously, and I hope that we will in the future.
Well, I think it's also important to stress, just to make a nuance here, we need to also stress that we are not EU officials. We're elected representative, democratically elected representative of our voters with a free mandate. So it's also important to have this balance there. Our voters can also decide who to give their trust to and trust with this office. So we need to have this code of conduct, but we should avoid in future only having public officials, former policy advisors or political advisors here.
Okay.
We also need people from business, people from who have taken up responsibility also in society and continue to do so. So we have to find a balance.
And on that point, Chandler, we can conclude this very interesting conversation. For more, you can take a look at euronews.com. But for now, thank you so much to our panel for being with us, and thank you so much for watching. See you soon on Euronews. Hello there, you're watching Brussels, My Love, Euronews' weekly chat show on European affairs. I'm Maeve McMahon, broadcasting from the European Parliament in Strasbourg, where I'm taking a look back at the news this week with the Austrian Liberal MEP, Anna Storch, the Dutch Conservative MEP, Sander Smit, and the Spanish Socialist MEP, Hanna Jalul Muro. And now that the last plenary session of the year is done, the focus is on the Christmas break. And this weekend is known as Super Saturday, when millions of people flock to the high streets to panic buy all their Christmas presents. And of course, most of these gifts then are packaged in layers of plastic and then wrapped in layers of gift wrapping paper and tinsel. And although they look pretty, they are leaving their homes full of clutter and waste. To hear what impact this is all having on the planet and how we can strive for a more sustainable festive season, we had a chat with Katja Maslova from Euroconsumers.
Christmas is a time of joy. It's a time where we should not feel guilt. And consumers cannot be the only ones who carry the weight of sustainability. We found in one of our surveys of 77% of consumers already incorporating sustainability when it comes to product choices. We do need companies to do more as well. We need them to create products that last longer. We need products that are easily repairable. We also need them to tell us how long products will last. So it also comes, the other side of the coin. It's not all about consumers.
Katja Maslova there from Euroconsumers on the responsibility, of course, that companies play here. Your reaction to that, Anna, and your plans to have a sustainable Christmas, or what kind of Christmas?
Well, actually, because you said wrapping paper, I wrap all my gifts in old newspapers. So, that's one thing. But, jokes aside, I think circular economy is what this is all about, really. And this is something that we've seen the Parliament take up in the last mandate with eco-design, etc. But there's still a lot of ways to go if we really want to get to a place where products are repairable, where we can make sure that they are recyclable. But I think what's important to say here is that it's not only the Parliament that has to work here. It's not only the legislature that has to work here, but it's also about research and development and innovation. So we have to strengthen that as well, because only in that way can we actually get products that are recyclable, so that we see.
And as you've seen, the studies say consumers do want that here in Europe. And anyway, in the States, I don't think so, but here for sure.
I think it's very important that we don't scapegoat Christmas shopping. I think it's an important time also for our SMEs and shop owners and for ourselves as well. So let's enjoy it. But I fully agree that here we fully agree also, I think, that we need to work towards a more circular economy, also raise consumer awareness. But let's also, as legislators, co-legislators, provide businesses with viable business models to use secondary raw materials, because that's lacking now.
Yes.
Virgin materials are too easily available, but also inexpensive, and secondary raw materials are not stimulated enough. I think also if we want recycling, because that's what it boils down to, if we want recycling, we also have to be honest with ourselves. Also, this group that we also need have residual streams from waste recycling, and we have to process these waste streams. We're now exporting our waste as the EU. We're importing products and exporting our hazardous and other waste, also plastic waste. But then we also need to be open to improve our circularity by, for instance, waste-to-energy applications.
And that's why the EU Commission has its first ever circular economy commissioner now. And we actually had a chat with her earlier this week, Brussels, My Love. We met her on the sidelines of the EU Council meeting. We can take a listen to her now. Jessica Roswell.
So it's a lot of things that we need to do, of course, both on policies, that we politicians make the rules easier and more simplified, maybe more standards. Asking when we talk about secondary raw materials, of course, also how can we boost the demand for that? And then, of course, businesses need to also do the scale up. How can we help them to scale up the circularity? And then, of course, also to us consumers, we we also need to go circular. And that is, of course, a responsibility for all of us.
So, Hannah, your thoughts here, and if you think member states will also get on board with this?
I think so. I pretty much agree with what my colleague said here and with the sentence before of no guilt, but responsibility now that the Commissioner have said. I think that a lot of pedagogy, should be made in this point, like circular economy, raw materials reuse, with textiles also reduce plastics, reduce waste, and teach our kids also to do so. That's very important, that's very important. When you're using papers or the newspapers, that's used for, wrapping up the presents, but then you go there with them to the waste place and do that. And also, which it is very important, let them know that there are other people that they don't have the opportunities. Look, these parties are for joy and a beautiful Christmas, and I wish you all Merry Christmas. And it's nice also dates and days to think in the ones that they do not have, And with this also you are teaching the kids also, how to not do that waste, how other kids they do not have, what we do also with plastic, what with the...
But that's the thing, you talk about kids. I mean, the kids are attracted to shiny things, shiny wrapping paper, not necessarily newspaper. They love plastic, they love plastic toys, they love gathering clutter. So it's also about changing perhaps their mindset as well.
I mean, I don't know. My little daughter actually prefers to play with cutlery and anything that isn't a toy. So, I think there is...
very sustainable.
Yeah.
That is very sustainable. But just to get back to this point of this being Mission Impossible, the task now that Commissioner Jessica Roswell has in front of her, the thing is, we're sitting on mountains and mountains of electronic waste. If you look in any drawer in your house, you'll find it.
Yeah.
And we didn't even discuss fast fashion. No. How many years are we talking about here that we'll really be able to change this thinking and this culture while also bringing business along?
Yeah, it's very important. Over especially the last 5 years, we've opted, or at least the Commission took the way to have more paternalistic regulation also of straws and caps on bottles. This is something consumers do not like, but that's why I want to ask entrepreneurs, what do you need to increase the recycling rate? Because we have now a rate of only not even 12% last year in the European Union, circularity rate. So we really need to increase this. Yes. I think Commissioner Roswell, who hails from an EPP party, is also aware of this fact. So ask entrepreneurs, what do you need? And then also be honest also that we will have to have waste processing facilities also in the EU increase, and that we cannot export our electronic but also our plastic waste to third countries and import from third countries. We should do away with that because, as we spoke already on, it's important for the climate, but this is also not only good for the climate and environment, also smart business. If you use less materials, you're less dependent and you're spending less.
And on that point, Chandra, we can conclude this conversation. Thank you so much for being with us, Anna Stork, Hannah Jalul-Muro and Chandra Schmidt. Thanks for being our guests.
Thank you.
If you have any comments for us on this show, please email us. BrusselsMyLove@Euronews.com is our address. You can also send us a message on social media and we will get back to you. Thanks so much for watching. Have a lovely festive season and see you soon here on Euronews.